Dziękuję. To ja może, dziękuję, oczywiście do tego pytania się odniosę, bardzo mi miło. Ja może też troszkę przy okazji zrobię wstępu do tego, o czym będziemy mówili z panią ambasador. Ja akurat mam tą przyjemność, że ja z panią ambasador współpracowałem dosyć aktywnie w kilku wymiarach mojego życia zawodowego. Ja byłem członkiem zarządu American Chamber of Commerce, byłem w Atlantic Council, prowadziłem kilka amerykańskich spółek, które były bardzo zaangażowane w obszar, który pani ambasador pokrywała, więc dzisiaj zaprosiliśmy panią ambasador wspólnie z organizatorami po to, żebyśmy dostali taką perspektywę trochę zewnętrzną. Osoby, która Polskę zna bardzo dobrze i troszkę będziemy o tym rozmawiali, ja trochę z panią ambasador porozmawiam o tym jej doświadczeniu, ale przede wszystkim spojrzeniu transatlantyckim. Weszliśmy w moment, który z punktu widzenia tych połączeń transatlantyckich bardzo mocno naruszył fundamenty tego, do czego przywykliśmy. Perspektywa pani ambasador, pamiętajcie, że ona była powołana przez administrację Trumpa, wtedy kiedy Trump był po raz pierwszy prezydentem, więc ona jest bardzo mocno dalej połączona w ten ekosystem, który dzisiaj podejmuje decyzje w Waszyngtonie i który bardzo mocno wpływa na to, w jaki sposób jest kreowana, kształtowana polityka inwestycyjna, kapitałowa i współpraca z Unią Europejską. O tym chciałem troszkę porozmawiać. Jest kilka tematów, które pani ambasador bardzo aktywnie podnosiła i to jest trochę odpowiedź na to pytanie, tak? Jesteśmy w momencie, kiedy widzimy, co się dzieje z punktu widzenia pewnych przetasowań na rynku inwestycyjnym. Mamy dual use, mamy rynek defense, który szczególnie w naszej części świata przeżywa niebywały renesans. Troszkę też o tym porozmawiamy. Mamy niezależność energetyczną, która generuje niebywałe potrzeby z punktu widzenia polityki inwestycyjnej, szczególnie w obszar infrastruktury, szczególnie w obszary, które uzależniają Europę, kontynent Polskę od historycznej zależności od Rosji oraz jeszcze innych krajów. Przypominam, co się właśnie dzieje w Iranie w tym momencie. Plus do tego dochodzi bardzo duża zmiana sejsmiczna, technologiczna. Mówiliście dzisiaj państwo o tym, o sztucznej inteligencji, nie mówiliście o cyberbezpieczeństwie. Polska jest dzisiaj jednym z najbardziej atakowanych krajów z punktu widzenia flanki NATO przez szeroko rozumianych tak zwanych złych aktorów. Zatem to wszystko powoduje, że alokacja aktywów dzisiaj z punktu widzenia funduszy private equity, ja akurat w tej chwili jestem w funduszu private equity w Arabii Saudyjskiej, aktywnie inwestujemy, globalnie w Polsce troszkę mniej, bardzo widzimy dużą zmianę. Widzimy, że są przetasowania, które powodują, że generalnie ta polityka inwestycyjna, która wcześniej stała się już takim jakby pewnym stałym modelem, teraz nabiera pewnej zmiany, pewnej redefinicji i o tym chcielibyśmy porozmawiać.
Marcin Petrykowski, Georgette Mosbacher.
Hello, Madam Ambassador, great to see you. Can we hear you? Sadly, we first need
I'm sorry I can't be there in person.
We know we were expecting your presence in person, but you are a very busy lady, hence we fully understand that you are stuck in London. London is a beautiful place, though one day hopefully you will have a chance to also visit Nałęczów, which is a spectacularly romantic city, not far away from Poland. But anyway, great to see you. I'm not sure whether you see the room.
I'd rather be in Poland.
You have a full room of leaders from the fund management and investment industry in Poland, a country that still remains very close to your heart. Therefore, we are even more happy to have you here. Maybe first allow me, because you are a extremely well, I would say, versed individual on the Polish market, though you're also very modest. Therefore, please maybe first allow me to recap some of the key achievements that you have contributed or spearheaded while being the ambassador. Why? Because they will set the scene for our conversation. We need to be grateful to you for the visa waiver program. It is now a key feature of the transatlantic relationship that we have with the US. You have significantly enhanced the Polish and US-Poland defense cooperation. Under your leadership, the country signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which up to today, in a way as if you were a prophet, you did see in which direction Europe is heading, and now this becomes a key pillar of national security. You have significantly accelerated the Free Seas Initiative, and I will want to spend a bit of time on that. I still consider that a project which you can consider as your baby, as your child. Let's talk a bit about that. This is now coming back. And last but not least, energy security. I remember the work we were conducting together under the umbrella of the Atlantic Council, when you were very vocal about the need for Europe to become more independent in terms of its energy consumption. And again, prophecy. Madam Ambassador, this topic came back with a vengeance. Not to mention your continuous involvement in the business scene. So with all of that, well, you've been recognized by the President of Poland with the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit. So we couldn't have invited a better person to conduct this conversation. Welcome and thank you for spending time with us. So I think, in order for us to build the framework, what I wanted to ask and start the conversation with is, in a way, draw back to the time that you've spent in Poland and build a parallel from Poland onto Europe and hopefully up to the US from the framework of the future of capital markets. So you served in Warsaw at a completely pivotal moment for Poland and for the region. Yeah, we are now representing a country that continues to have a spectacular growth story, that continues to strengthen its position in the European Union, that is now the biggest defense spender across NATO, over 4%. So yes, the framework's there. Investments are floating in. I think the key question, though, remains in the room. Poland and Europe, from your vantage point, what is the single most important shift that we as a region and as a country must make to remain competitive globally? Because the times are changing and all of the other actors are also strengthening their forces. So can you shed a bit of light on that? And let's treat that as an opening point for the audience.
Very good. Thank you, Marcin. And congratulations to Poland on being the 21st largest economy in the world. That is quite an accomplishment that everyone should be proud of. To answer your question, I think Europe must move from a capital preservation mindset to a capital deployment mindset. The US system excels not because it has more capital, but because it mobilizes risk capital faster and at scale. Sector, and particularly Central Eastern Europe, needs mechanisms that allow capital to move decisively into strategic sectors such as energy, defense, AI, and infrastructure. And I think that is the key.
Got it. So I think, the point around capital preservation to capital deployment mindset, I think that's a very important takeaway. And I think that allows us to pivot a bit into which type of capital are we really talking about, as capital is a very wide subject. So maybe first, let's talk a bit about public capital. In the US, there is a huge legacy of utilizing public capital in order to build alignment with private capital. In our part of the world, in Poland in particular, we were, and I will use that word, spoiled by historical availability of EU funds. We were spoiled by an ability to utilize bank funding. Hence, a key project that you are advocating, public-private partnerships, never kicked off. Can you tell a bit more about that? Because this seems a tool that in the current times, we spoke about defense, you mentioned energy, you mentioned infra, could be a blessing that the market still needs to, I would say, redesign itself for. Can you talk a bit more about that? How do PPPs place themselves into the new framework?
The issues that we face today are just too big for either the public or the private sector to do independently. I think traditional public-private sectors basically have been too slow, too bureaucratic, and too risk adverse. The next generation of PPPs must function as capital accelerators, not just financial tools. And these structural shifts are required. Going to need to do, I think, got a risk rebalancing. Governments must absorb early stage risk to crowd in private capital. And then, of course, speed of execution. Approval timelines must shrink from years to months. And strategic alignment. Private-public partnerships must be tied to national and transatlantic priorities, energy security, defense capacity, digital sovereignty. These are the things that are going to drive that.
Thank you. That's a very concrete framework. You're extremely pointed. I think, risk balancing, speed of execution. I think you mentioned you were alluding to strategic alignment. But then, on an industry level, like which industries or which areas within the framework of investments could PPPs benefit the most?
Energy infrastructure, defense industrial capacity. These are capital intensive, long duration assets where private capital alone will hesitate without government alignment. It's that simple.
Makes sense. I think, we completely buy into that notion. Even here we had a few conversations how to activate that type of capital. Are there any best practices from your experience in the US or in other markets that you could potentially share with us? Like very briefly, what to focus on?
I think because Europe has focused on creating startups, not on scaling companies. Today, it's about speed and scale. The real gap is not early stage capital, it's growth capital. Yeah. In the US, companies scale from 50 million to 500 million rapidly. In Europe, they stall or get acquired. And you've got to set up a venture capital ecosystem if you're going to be able to scale at speed, and that's what you're going to have to do today.
Understood. So you're more, I hear you. So effectively, even though we have a startup ecosystem, the whole notion now is about later stage and scaling businesses, which again, where the US has proven to be extremely successful. So again, same question, what could be the structural fixes that you could envisage in that space?
Well, countries individually and collectively, they must create national and regional scaling funds. These funds should be large enough to matter, $5 billion to $20 billion range, I would say. They've got to focus on late stage growth, Series C and above. They need to be anchored by public capital, but managed privately. Have a mandate to keep companies European while scaling globally. That's the other thing. In order for these startups to scale, they leave Europe. They have to come to the United States because that's where the risk capital is.
I hear you, but the elephant in the room remains. What role should governments play in this? Well,
look, government can play a role in these funds. Governments should act as a cornerstone investors, not operators. Their role should be to de-risk and catalyze, not to manage. They have to find ways to make it attractive for private capital to come in, and that they've got to find ways to de-risk capital, and governments can do that.
Yeah, I hear you, and I think here we have an audience also composed of state-owned banks and state-owned insurance companies, which could be exactly this type of cornerstone operators, which I think is the point that you're making. Thank you for that, and I think maybe then we spoke a bit about public capital, and I like the analogy that you made around scaling. So the emphasis about scaling fast, it does remain a European dilemma. But again, scaling fast is easy to say, especially if we do have a fragmented capital market and still funds continue to evolve more from the US. So from your, again, vantage point, what does that actually require in practice? Yeah, and again, maybe let's put this back into Poland. Like, where does Poland sit on that readiness curve? Like, where are we and what part can we play?
Well, I think scaling fast is not just about capital now. It's an ecosystem. You need deep capital pools. Large checks must be deployable quickly without fragmented approvals. Regulatory alignment. Cross-border scaling in Europe is still too complex. We need to harmonize capital market rules. You got to have exit pathways. Strong IPO markets and secondary liquidity are critical. Without exits, capital stalls. And talent mobility. Scaling companies need the ability to recruit globally fast. Strategic players. Corporations must play a more active role as acquirers and partners. To scale, you've got to be willing to be able to look at acquisitions, because scaling bigger is better. And to compete today, you have to have that size in order to compete.
I couldn't agree more, but still, we operate under the framework that we have as a continent, that we have as a European Union. So again, are we structurally capable of executing on that plan?
Well, yes, I think you are, but only if it acts collectively. Fragmentation is Europe's biggest constraint. And the ability to be able to work collectively, build that ecosystem, and that ecosystem of capital and risk will have to work across borders.
Yeah, 27 capital markets doesn't help. I hear you. Yeah, though it is a very big political discussion, which I think is creating a lot of tension. But I think you're completely right. That's why the U.S. is so powerful, because of its unity in terms of the capital markets. So I think that's reading between the lines, and you're a diplomat. Therefore, you're not saying it loud, but I probably would call that, I would hear that as a call for action for the capital market union, which completely makes sense. So let's turn this discussion maybe a bit back to the Free Seas Initiative, which again is, I mentioned it is a landmark achievement that you've spearheaded. And again, this is now coming back. It's now coming back because of infrastructure, because of energy. So as you were directly involved not only in the whole alignment, but also in the fund, how do you see this? Because you said less fragmentation in Europe. How can the U.S. play a part in that? How can we align more closely with the U.S.?
Look, the U.S. invested in the last fund. We have already got proof of concept. But the question is whether we can draw on the private sector to put up another fund. The U.S. has already said it has $1 billion earmarked for the Three Seas Fund 2. But in order to get that, you have to raise $2 billion from the private sector. So we go back to the same situation. Where does that come from? That's got to come from the private sector, who is willing to make those investments, take those risks. And certainly, you've got the infrastructure needs in the Three Seas region to attract that capital. And that capital is there. The sovereign wealth funds have infrastructure funds that are really looking for just the kind of investments that Central Eastern Europe has. However, again, the transatlantic relationship should be viewed as a single strategic capital ecosystem. And I would say that's the Three Seas region can do that, because quite frankly, the Three Seas region is growing at twice the rate as the West. So this is a natural place for investors to come to invest. The U.S. provides depth, liquidity, and scale. Europe provides industrial capacity and innovation clusters. I mean, together, they can finance energy independence, build defense supply chains, compete in the AI and advanced technologies. But that requires the private sector being willing to step up and build this venture capital ecosystem. You have the money. The question is how to best deploy it. Capital will flow elsewhere to regions that move faster and take more risk. And that's the reality you're up against. And with that, strategic influence follows. So there is this opportunity in the Three Seas. The fund is already attracting investors, but it's got to be it's got to be private sector led. And the U.S. is willing to put the money alongside private sector money. But again, the private sector has to prove that it believes in it to get the money from the United States.
We hear you. I think that's exactly a plan we would love to gain more and more traction. Do you see it really, like, again, this is a bit of a personal, or more like a personal perspective, but do you see that narrative being actively discussed within the U.S. administration these days? Is that a topic that is on the agenda?
Yes, absolutely. Look, the United States Congress and the DFC, the Finance Corporation, is already investing in the region. But part of that, the ability for it to invest, one of the rules is that it can only invest 1/3 along 2/3 private sector capital. So that $1 billion is sitting there. So the question is, how do we mobilize the private sector in Central Eastern Europe to invest in the fund? And until we can do that, and by the way, it's not just Central Eastern Europe. There are sovereign wealth funds out there that have infrastructure funds, BlackRock, KKR, they all have infrastructure funds. Yeah. But again, that requires all of the above that we've been talking about. It requires the government being willing to cut regulations, give guarantees. I would have liked to have seen at the last 3C conference, very frankly, I would have liked to have seen the presidents of the 3C's countries stand up there and each one say, come to Poland. We'll give you the land tax-free for 20 years if you build a 3C's printing facility. I would have liked to have seen them make concrete statements that attract a private capital. And that's what we really have to focus on. And and I will repeat myself, that's an ecosystem. And a venture capital ecosystem is what Central Eastern Europe is lacking. And we've got to build that.
I hear you. No, that's a beautiful way to frame it. I think you mentioned trust somewhere along the way. What is your current view of trust in capital markets? How would you frame the trust of the future with like all of the changes that are taking? How would you see that point?
Well, look, there's no longer, trust is no longer just about transparency. Right? It's about predictability and execution. You're going to have to prove that you can execute the projects, and there's got to be predictability. The government rules can't change midstreams. Digital systems have to be secure. Governments are reliable partners, but they've got to prove that they can be reliable partners. If Europe can combine trust with speed, it becomes one of the most attractive capital markets globally. And the future of capital markets will not be defined by how much capital we have, but by how quickly and strategically we deploy it.
That's a beautiful way to end it. That's a beautiful way. The future of capital markets will not be defined by how much capital we have, even though we're fragmented, but how quickly and strategically we
Europe
deploy
doesn't
it.
lack capital.
Yeah, you're right, it does.
It lacks scale mechanisms. It doesn't lack capital, it lacks scale mechanisms. Yeah. Public capital should unlock private capital, not replace it. The next competitive advantage is speed of capital deployment and scaling, not starting, is Europe's real challenge. Central Eastern Europe needs to create a venture capital ecosystem and get comfortable with calculated risk. And that's the bottom line.
Thank you. That's very informative and I would say very pointed and very detailed. Just a matter of converting this into notes. Hopefully AI can help us with that and then share it with policymakers so that they can factor that in terms of all of the ongoing changes that are taking place. Madam Ambassador, I know you have a very busy schedule, so we will let you go, but we need to express our gratitude for sharing this time with us and sharing a bit of your wisdom with us. Would there be any closing line that you would like to appeal to the Polish asset management and fund industry in terms of one area they should focus on continuously when they think about the future of the capital markets?
I'll just say it again, because this is what it's about. Bottom line, it's about willing to take risk, and it's about scaling and speed, because things are moving too fast today. And if you aren't able to scale with speed, you will be left behind. There will be someone right on your shoulder willing to do that.
We don't want to be in those shoes, Madam Ambassador. We want to be the front runner rather than the ones caught in the back. So we take that on board. Thank you very much. Pleasure to see you. Pleasure to see you sparkling and
Marcin,
shining as
it's
always.
Good.
Take care, all the best, and hope that next time we will meet in person. Thank you very much.
Yes, I look forward to it. Poland's in my heart. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy. Dzięki.